Some of you may be curious as to why I don't put this on the EV channel or the tech channel or something, but I think I wanted to put it here on life because this is honestly more of a financial investment topic, and you'll understand why as the video progresses. And I also just want to preface from the beginning that I'm not against solar as a technology by any means. Like, I love the concept of being able to harness energy directly from the sun. I think that's over time going to become the cheapest form of energy. I want more solar everywhere, and I'm happy to see solar panels on so many houses, and that's part of the reason I'm such a huge fan of Aptera's, because they want to put solar directly on the car itself. And I love that idea, self-charging, being more self-reliant, being more independent from the grid. So with all of that hype surrounding solar, you may be wondering, why have we not decided to put solar on our house? We've got an electric car, we work from home, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Well, like most complex topics, there is not one sole reason. There's actually a bunch of little reasons that have kind of stacked up as to why we've decided, at this time at least, it's not a good idea for us. But for one, of course, considering we have a Tesla, and pretty much from what I can tell, comparing quotes and prices from other solar providers, Tesla has the cheapest solar you can possibly get. And there's two problems in the way. For one, I've checked with Tesla on this multiple times throughout the years, and sadly there's been no updates. Tesla will not put solar on a metal roof, which unfortunately I was not aware that was going to be a limitation when we bought this house. But yeah, our roof is metal, and it's a specific type of metal that Tesla doesn't like installing solar on. And your first reaction to that may be, well, okay, if you need a different roof, or Tesla doesn't want to put panels on that roof, you need to buy the official Tesla solar roof and, you know, probably increase the resale value of the house and what have you, and just have full solar plus those roof tiles all integrated together. Well, when I plug in my location, this is what Tesla says. They go, we're not currently serving your area with solar roofs. And according to most recent reports, it seems like the rollout of solar roofs has gone way slower than Tesla originally thought, which means that when you live in more rural areas like I do, it's just straight up not available. But coming back to the subject of panels themselves, even if we did replace this roof with a traditional shingle roof, that way Tesla could come out with their solar panels and actually install them, we're already out the door looking at probably somewhere between $10,000–$15,000 on the roof replacement process. And then I have more long-term issues with the idea of solar actually saving you money over time. That's what everybody always wants to talk about with the concept of putting solar on their house. It's a large upfront investment, but over time it lowers your electricity bill, and ultimately you'll end up saving money over the long haul. You gotta calculate that break-even point. After what amount of investment does it start making you money, and how much time is it going to take to get that money back? Well, my parents originally got solar at the house I grew up at, and had noticed that just within the 10 years that they had solar on their house, there were lots of problems and basically liability of having solar panels. Between when they went to sell their house, they had to get quotes and estimates from certified technicians to how much it cost to take solar off of the roof and then replace the roof and then hire someone to put the solar panels back on. And we actually have some friends that had solar for a while but had to get their roof replaced, and just the process of taking the panels off and putting them back on added an additional $4,000 to the overall roof repair costs. So that eats into your break-even point as well, and it's also a factor that you have to consider when selling the house. A lot of realtors actually don't like it when there's solar on the house, because now there's more complexities if that solar is leased versus who's certified to take the solar down and replace it if the roof needs repair and that kind of thing. And I even have a contractor friend that's very skeptical of the whole concept, because roofs are very expensive parts of home maintenance, and when you bolt solar to roofs, there's more places for water to get in, and it's more likely for the roof to leak overall. But let's just ignore that for a second and pretend solar is not a liability or won't go wrong. Hopefully the technicians you have and everything will do it properly. But the investment, how quickly will you get your money back? This is where I have a bit more skepticism, at least where I live. This could be totally different in the state or country you're in, but where I live, by the year, they are constantly changing tax laws. Like, the electricity companies are changing the rates of how much credit they give you when you pump energy back into the grid with your excess solar. And most recently, they were even trying to pass a law for more taxation on basically houses that had solar. And the law didn't pass, but I think it started to scratch the surface on the long-term issue that a lot more populated states like California are going to experience over the long haul, because right now they're enforcing like all new houses built need to have solar. And not only that, there's existing houses that are all switching to solar so that they don't have to pay the utility companies much or anything at all, depending on how much you produce and how much you use. But there's still this giant, very expensive and hard to maintain grid, especially with a lot of the wildfires that we've had. There's a big push more recently in our area to switch a lot of the high voltage wiring and stuff to go underground instead of above ground, so that it's less likely to cause fires and it's easier to service and it's harder for like a car to drive into a pole and knock out power, or trees to fall over in these crazy windstorms and knock out power that way. So if anything, the cost is growing to maintain our grid that so many people, even with solar, rely on, because if you don't have a way to store that energy, then you've got to pull from the grid at nighttime. But over time, there's exponentially more and more people with solar that are expecting to pay less for their bills. So where's the utility company, where's the grid supposed to get money to switch to more underground wiring and to maintain the existing grid, all the wiring, all these power lines and stuff that need to be maintained and operated? Those costs aren't going down for them, and electricity consumption is going up with the adoption of electric vehicles. So there was already an attempt, and again, the tax laws and energy consumption laws are changing on an annual basis, to say, okay, well, rather than apply more fees and growing costs of electricity to the houses that don't have solar, we're just going to start attaching more fees and a bit more expense to the people with solar, because I guess they're the ones that are paying in the least but still trying to benefit off of the purpose of having a grid in the first place. So regardless of if you have solar or not, really this grid is going to need to be funded somehow, whether it's going to be state subsidized or federally subsidized. It's kind of too early to say, as more and more people are like, I don't want to pay for electricity anymore, I'm just going to pay for my own. So a lot of you are probably ahead of me. Well, this means the future is going off grid. We just need to buy power walls with our solar. That way we have a way to store energy and you can disconnect grid access. That way they can't fine you extra for having solar, being connected to the grid. You just won't be a customer of the utility company anymore. Well, for one, having those extra power walls eats into that break-even point. So once again, existing power wall is over $9,000. So for our situation, couple that with the new roof, plus the solar, plus the power wall, you're easily talking well over $30,000 in investment here to basically cut out a $200 a month bill. And over a certain number of years, sure, I could imagine that would eventually start to make sense, but there's a lot of unknowns that can happen over the course of 10, 15, or 20 years trying to reach that break-even point. And also keep in mind, solar doesn't necessarily last forever. After 25 years, the cells are a lot less efficient and typically need to be replaced. So if your break-even point is getting closer and closer to that 25-year mark, it's actually saving you less and less. It's a very large upfront expense that might end up saving you $5,000 or $6,000 over the course of 25 years. And that's when you kind of have to compare it to the overall stock market. You know, you could invest all that money in solar panels and power walls and being independent from the grid, or you could invest that money in high dividend mutual funds and index funds that appreciate over that 20 to 25 years. And it might not necessarily be an investment that nets you more money than what solar would have. And I'm not trying to say that no one should get solar, for the record. I think that if your roof is already set up for it, your break-even point is objectively going to be much lower and much sooner than it would be for us. And I'm speculating a lot on what governments may do. I could see California being as weird as they are, saying like, oh, well, if anyone's attached to the grid, we're going to increase your fees because we need some way to fund all of this grid maintenance. I think there's a chance of that happening. I don't have a confirmation or a guarantee that that will happen. I could be totally off in my numbers, and I still think there's a greater than 50% chance that buying solar, even though it's a very large expense, and even if you buy power walls and you're increasing the overall investment amount, there's still a decent chance that you will save money in the long run. It's just, I think that there is a greater than, say, 20% chance that the government is going to make it harder for you to save money on this purchase because they need a way to maintain the grid, and that break-even point could fluctuate. You know, you could have your solar calculator right now that says, okay, after 8 or 9 years, this will start saving you money. But if the policies change and the taxation changes, that could get pushed out to 15 or 20 years if they just start saying, we're going to charge you a flat fee to access the grid. And on top of that, I didn't even even mention that a lot of our house is still powered by natural gas, and solar isn't really going to offset the natural gas expenses for us, which means our wall heater, our water heater, our stove, all of that stuff is still powered by gas, which means in order for us to go off grid and go the Powerwall route, we would need to replace our heater with more mini splits, heat pumps, which would probably even use less energy, but then we'd have to buy electric water heater and also a fully electric dryer. Our dryer right now uses natural gas. So once again, there would probably be an additional $4,000, maybe $5,000 of home appliances that we would have to switch to all electric. And again, with that additional investment comes the delaying of that break-even point. And as you get closer to that 25-year mark, it starts to financially make less and less sense, opposed to just keeping that money in a high dividend stock, which can pay out quarterly, and ideally, with that kind of large upfront investment, result in passive income to where you're actually bringing in $100 a month or $200 a month just in dividends or just in the average growth of the stock, period. And that will cover the high electricity rates that are kind of outside of our control. So I'm not 100% convinced in my theory, and I think there's a decent chance I could be very wrong, but just on the off chance that I'm right, I think just building up more forms of passive income might end up paying off more than solar panels, which I've also had friends that bought solar and then had technical issues with them. And then for months and months, they were waiting for service technicians to come out and either clean them or analyze what's wrong with the system. But in those months, your electric bill still goes up because your solar panels aren't generating enough. On top of that, we're also big fans of traveling. Like, we're going to take several month-long trips later this year. And during those months, even if you have a Powerwall, if you're out of the country and you're generating more energy than you're using, if you try to disconnect yourself from the grid to avoid those grid access fees, you're still not going to be saving that much money, because if we didn't have solar, our electric bill and everything would still be just like 20 or 30 bucks basically to keep the hot water heater running and to keep the security cameras running and basic stuff like that. So because we're planning on taking long distance trips out of the country, and because the roof is not good enough for Tesla solar panels or the Tesla solar roof, and I feel like the grid laws are fluctuating constantly in our area, that's why we're not really convinced on solar. But for the people that can do it, I'm jealous of you. I think that's awesome. I think that's really cool. But to me, at least, the next best thing would be putting the solar panels directly on the car. And I've even debated looking into those little portable solar setups that we could just put over our carport just to charge the Tesla, because the Tesla is by far the biggest electricity consumer at our house. So if there was a way to just charge that independently from the grid, yeah, maybe that would be a lower upfront investment. Maybe it would be a lot quicker of a break-even point than the giant investment of solar for the entire house. But I would love to see how much of you guys disagree with me or why you disagree with me. So please feel free, continue the discussion down below. I want to know how I'm wrong or what I'm getting wrong, and we can talk more about solar as an investment, not so much as just a cool technology. In which case, I'm very grateful to know, at least where I live, the grid is incredibly green, not just from my neighbors who have more solar than they need, which means the energy we're using from our household is coming from clean, renewable sources, but there's also solar farms not too far from here that are generating a ton of energy and pumping that back into the grid. So I think at wider scale for, industrial use, solar makes a lot of sense, but in our particular case, not quite. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.